Good evening and welcome to this meeting of West Berkshire Council's Eastern Area Planning Committee. I'm Councillor Alan McCrow. I'm Chair of the committee. The other members of the committee present this evening are Councillor Jeremy Cottam, Jeff Mays, Justin Pemberton, Vicky Pool and Richard Somner. The following officers are in attendance to advise and support the meeting. Simon Till, Team Manager, Gareth Dowding, Principal Engineer, Traffic and Road Safety, Sharon Armour, Legal Services Manager, Sam Chiverton, Zoom Host, Thomas Radbourne, Clerk to the meeting. Before we start proceedings, I'd like to explain that tonight's meeting is being held both over Zoom and with councillors present in the council chamber. The meeting is being live streamed over YouTube, so members of the public are able to follow proceedings. Please could I ask everybody present in the chamber to make sure you switch on your microphones when invited to speak directly into them and to switch them off when finished. Could I also ask everybody to make sure you put your mobile phones to silent and to turn the sound off on your laptops. If we hear the evacuation alarm this evening, you must leave the building immediately. Please proceed via the safe emergency exit route. Please follow any instructions given by officers. The assembly point is the car park of the Dolphin pub. If the lockdown alarm sounds, we will remain seated and await instructions from officers. We will adjourn the meeting until such time as it's safe to proceed. When voting, only members present in the chamber can vote, and voting will be by a show of hands. Do any members have any questions about the way the committee will proceed this evening? Thank you. Item 1, please. Apologies. Do we have any apologies for absence, please?
Thank you, Chairman. We have apologies received from Councillors Clive Taylor and Ross McKinnon, and Councillor Paul Kander is running late.
Thank you. Move on now to the minutes. Do any members wish to make any amendments to the minutes of the last meeting? Could I therefore ask for someone? Thank you, Councillor Somner and Jeremy. Councillor Cottam is seconding. Thank you. Those in favour of approving the minutes, please show. Thank you. That's unanimous. So the minutes have been approved, and I will sign the minutes and return them to the clerk. Remember what the date is. Thank you. Then move on to item 3, declarations of interest. Do any members wish to declare an interest? Councillor Pool.
Thank you, Chair. I wish to declare an interest in the second item, which is in Stratfield Mortimer. I'm a ward member for that ward. No member of the public has approached me about this application, and I am able to participate in the debate this evening.
So did you say no members have?
No members have. Sorry, Chair, very Geordie accent tonight.
Thank you. Councillor Mays.
Yeah, I'm aware of the application many years ago. I've been to the site. Oh, sorry. I've been to the site on many occasions, and I also know the Spratleys, who are adjacent landowners. They are my governor car garage.
So that's a personal interest.
Yes, just a personal one.
Thank you. Can we move on then to item 4, the first item to be considered, first application to be considered this evening is application 24/01866/FUL, land in Middlewood, Buckleby. I can ask Mr. Till to introduce the item, please.
Thank you, Chairman. Members, just bear with me and I'll share my screen for the presentation. Members, this application is for a permanent replacement for the temporary log cabin previously approved at Middlewood, which is a forestry business in Chapel Row. The application site is out of the settlement and within the North Wessex Downs National Landscape. Your officer's recommendation is for approval, and the application comes before you tonight because of more than 10 letters of objection being received. I'll now show the plans and photography of the site. On the screen at present is the location plan. This is the existing site plan with the proposed dwelling log cabin to be replaced, shown to the bottom of that plan to the east. And this is a proposed block plan showing the location of the proposed dwelling. This is a more detailed block plan, and you can see the layout of the site, including the existing outbuilding to be retained to the south of the proposed dwelling, the dotted line showing the existing timber log cabin, the parking to the east, and of course to the northeast, the replacement dwelling with the amenity space to the west of the site. Floor plans of the proposed dwelling. These are the proposed elevations of the dwelling, and members will note, and those of you who visited the site would appreciate, that there is a change in levels rising to the north of the site, and therefore the proposed dwelling has been designed to integrate with the slope and the change of levels there. So the north elevation you can see is more or less 1.5 stories, whereas the west elevation, south elevation are of a 2-story character. These are photographs of the site. This one is from the access looking to the north. This is the existing temporary log cabin building. This is across the application site curtilage as existing. The log cabin again. The access point looking down towards the log cabin, and you can see the outbuilding as well next to the log cabin in that photograph. The access from Hatch Lane. And this plan was produced at the request of members who visited the site, and this shows the application site in relation to the public rights of way. And unfortunately, I did have to zoom out quite considerably to produce this plan. So just to contextualise, the nearest right of way to the east, which is just south of Paradise Way, is 300 metres from the location of the proposed dwelling. To the north, it's 480 metres, and to the west, it's 580 metres. Members, it's worthy of note also that the entirety of this site is categorised as ancient woodland. Letters of objection raise the following matters: concerns regarding the precedent of more housing outside of the settlement and on the site, harm to local ecology and the environment, an increase in noise and traffic, poor design of the proposed dwelling, non-compliance with planning conditions from previous permissions, including the previous temporary permission for the log cabin, which members will note has expired. Members, turning first to the principle of a replacement dwelling on the site, it is enshrined in policy C5 that an exception to the general policy against new dwellings in the countryside is for dwellings for rural workers where it has been demonstrated that such are necessary for the security and viability of the business on site. In this case, the applicant has made sufficient submissions to justify a permanent dwelling on site in your officer's view, and this is carried through in the inspector's decision on the appeal against a similar dwelling on the site, which is referred to in the report and the appendix. Similarly, matters of design and other related impacts are also dealt with in the inspector's decision, which gives a strong steer that without any objection on ecology grounds, in the event that this application was refused, that an appeal would be upheld. Your officers did not consider that in terms of principal, design or other associated impacts, there are grounds to refuse this application in light of the clear steer given in the inspector's decision. And we're satisfied with those matters as outlined in the report. In respect of ecology, which formed the basis of the inspector dismissing the previous appeal on grounds of insufficient information, this application is now accompanied by sufficient information for the ecologist to confirm that officers are satisfied, subject to the mitigation measures set out in the schedule of conditions, and that the proposed works will not result in an adverse impact on local ecology. So, members, in view of the these considerations, your officer's recommendation is for approval subject to the conditions set out in your agenda report. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Till. Mr. Dowding, are there any comments from Highways, please?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. No, there are no comments at present from Highways.
Thank you. Can we move on then to public who wish to speak? First of all, we have some objectors. Lindsay Blakey, Gareth Jarrett and Caroline Jarrett. Would you like to come to the rostrum, please, or the podium?
Thank you.
Which, are the other two people wish to speak?
I don't think we've got enough time if it's only 5 minutes.
You do have the opportunity for one of you to speak and perhaps all three of you to be present to answer any questions.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay. So you have 5 minutes. Would you like a warning, say 1 minute before?
Yeah, go on then.
You don't have to have. Okay. And the timing will start as soon as you start speaking.
Okay. Thanks for the opportunity to speak on the application. When speaking today, we're representing a small group of residents. There are a larger group with concerns who are not directly fed into this representation, some of whom have separately objected to the application. We feel it's important to stress at the outset that we're not objecting to development in principle in this part of the parish, and certainly appreciate the need in West Berkshire and on a national basis. It's the location of this particular housing that's of concern. Our objections to the application stem from the same reasons it was originally rejected. This is an area of ancient designated woodland, situated outside of settlement boundaries, so there should be a clear presumption against development. Can you show slide 1? Yes. Great. The photos show the development that's taken place in the last 15 years from an area where there was no development in there at all through to a number of buildings on the site. But the only justification for now placing the residential property on the site, therefore, as you've already said, is relating to agricultural labour. The original application was refused on both financial and environmental grounds, to which we would add necessity. On the financial point, I don't know if anybody's seen the PowerPoint. It would have been on slide 9 if they have. The original application was refused due to concerns about the financial sustainability of the business. This appeared to be resolved through information subsequently submitted, but since that, the applicant has set up a new forestry management business called Timberheat, for which he is the sole person of significant control. There are no filed accounts at Companies House, so we have no way of knowing whether that still has financial sustainability on it. Given this uncertainty, we're concerned that if Timberheat were to cease to trade in the future, what would be the future of a permanent property now put on that site? The environmental concerns were on slide 8 of the PowerPoint we gave. As a tract of ancient woodland with a presumption against development, the impact is of critical concern, and for the most recent appeal, the environmental report seemed to be what's changed the recommendation. However, we don't believe the report fully reflects the current situation. For example, the report talks about light pollution. Can you put up the next slide, please? And the need for mitigation to protect species such as bats. But as you can see on the picture, there is already significant light pollution and light spill from facilities on site. So it seems rather academic to be talking about more light protection on the building itself. The report also talks about substantial fencing to enable badgers and such like to be kept out. But some of that fencing has been flattened in the last year by heavy machinery. So we don't see that the report really summarises the current situation. Moreover, the report says that it would only be effective if all the measures are fully enacted, and we're concerned that that won't necessarily happen. Various existing requirements of permissions have not been 100% complied with in our view, such as the residential structure, which was supposed to be a mobile home being a timber chalet, colours of the storage container for wood being, it's supposed to be green. I think it's blue, from my understand. I've not been on the site myself. And also there is some of the work that's been done in the recent past. For example, the significant work done on Carbins wood, some of which happened during the nesting season over the 2 years, would appear to suggest that there may be some concern about whether all the measures would be fully complied for in order to allay the environmental concerns. And I have to say, given that we know there are resource constraints on West Berkshire Council in terms of the ability to monitor and enforce these things, if there are concerns about whether it be done.
1 minute remaining.
Okay, that's great. Then, can we really rely on that environmental trust fully? The final concerns are about necessity, though. The application states that a house is needed in the proposed locations for security reasons, but we don't really see the reasons for this. Many businesses, including those in rural areas where we know there is an issue for crime, use locks, security cameras, that sort of thing. If there is a need to have a business owner to live close by, there are houses being built in Paradise Way that are affordable. And if it has to be closer to that site, we would suggest it would be right adjacent to the existing agricultural workers' cottages on the edge of the property, right next to existing facilities where there is much less risk of disruption to the buildings, to the forests. So that's our reasons why. Have I got...
Thank you. Would you like to remain there?
Sure.
In case there's any questions from members, please. Questions from members? Councillor Cotton.
Thank you. Through you, Chair. You mentioned bats. Do you have any evidence that this is an issue locally?
I think apart from the fact that we live there, so we see them all the time, they're actually mentioned in the environmental report.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Pool.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you for your presentation. I noticed from the slides, I think it was your slide 1, that there seems to be some reforestation since 2010. Is that right?
Not aware of any reforestation.
Can we go back to slide 1? It might have just been, because the forest, as the images that I see from then, 2023 is relatively bare. And then as you go forward to 2010, it seems to be much more of a full area, or is that just a zoomed in approach?
I think it's because you've zoomed right in as the problem, because you can't really see where the properties are on the one on the left-hand side.
Okay, lovely. Thank you for the clarification.
Okay.
Any other questions from members, please? Thank you very much.
All right, thank you.
Could I now call on James Waitan, who's the applicant. Would you like to come to the podium, please? You also have 5 minutes. Would you like a warning when towards the end? Okay, thanks. And if you could remain when you finished for members' questions, please. Thank you.
Good evening. We're seeking to get plan permission to build a home for me and my family. Our current temporary building, what we've lived in now for 7 years, is starting to become very run down, and we need a safe, warm house to bring up our child who starts school locally in September. I run the firewood business with my partner, and we use several local self-employed subcontractors. Our client base is the local community, and our clients are long-standing. I've been running my business since 2012, and I've worked tirelessly to keep the business profitable and sustainable. We have also provided the council with updated financial reports up to October 2024. I studied forestry in college, and this gave me invaluable insight into the industry. I now have 13 years of experience within forestry. I have the utmost respect for the woodland and my local community as I live and work here, and strongly refuse the suggestion that I don't respect the area. The woodland, which was bought originally for my mother using her insurance payout from her terminal cancer. Her dream was to own the woodland, and my dad made this wish come true for her. I know that many of you are concerned that I want to build multiple houses on the woodland, but this is not the case. The reason for living in the woodland was for security business purposes for my business and management of the woodland. Before we built the temporary cabin, we were having several break-ins a week and equipment stolen on a weekly basis, and I was starting to become a real problem keeping the business afloat financially. Since living on the site, the crime level has luckily been reduced massively. As many of you know, rural crime is a big problem at the moment, and it's extremely important for me to protect my small family business from these crimes. The woodland that is classed as ancient woodland is actually planted in the 1960s to be harvested for forestry products, hence the construction of the main forestry track through the middle of the woodland back in the 60s. I would also like to add that since this application has been in, I haven't had any of the local residents come and speak to me in person so that I can help address any concerns that they may have. All I seem to get is hateful assumptions posted online. The design. I want to talk briefly about the design of the proposed house. The house we built on concrete hardstanding and the made-up lawn within the current fenced garden area. The build area is marked as hardstanding with the RPA, and none of the ancient woodland will be lost. It's an incredibly modest house that we made from the woodland that we'll mill ourselves on site. The house is positioned in front of our current cabin and offer a good overview of the yard for security and closed for loading the biomass boilers in the evening. The building can't be seen from any public rights of way or neighbouring properties. All the design elements are in keeping with the local area and similar to other new builds built down the road in the village. In summary, this house provides security for my family and security for my business. Thank you for your time, and I'm happy to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you. Members have any questions, please? Councillor Pemberton.
Yes, thank you for your presentation. Just a point of clarification really around the business ownership and structure.
Yeah.
I think the previous contributor mentioned the fact that the limited company had recently been set up. Company's House confirms that as February last year, obviously no accounts filed. What was the reason for that change of structure? How did it operate prior to early 2024?
We were a partnership business before, and we changed to a limited, obviously, to protect our liability. Now we've got staff.
Thanks.
Councillor Pool.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you again for your contribution. The dwelling itself, would it be a private dwelling or is it an asset owned by the business?
I'm hoping it to be a private dwelling, but I think it would be attached to the business by a condition.
And just for clarification, do you mean that would be like a residence where you would record that residence or that address as a place of work rather than a commercial property?
I mean, at the moment, all my work stuff comes to the house anyway, so I can imagine that would stay the same. So yeah, it would class as business, but sort of I'll be paying for it out of my own pocket.
Okay, thank you.
Any more questions? Okay. Thank you very much. Thank you. The call on Councillor Chris Reid, who's the ward member for Bucklebury. You also have 5 minutes, Councillor Reid. Would you like a warning?
Yes, please. I always go over, so that 1 minute warning is always appreciated.
Remain when you're finished for any questions, please.
Okay, will do. Thank you, Chair and members of the committee. First of all, I'd like to thank Councillors Macro and Taylor for attending the site visit to understand the setting. It's a shame that Councillor Taylor is an apology. So you have heard from the objectors who live close to the setting along Hatch Lane, which is the main road that goes in front of Middlewood, and you have heard from the businessman, James, and current resident of the site to help you make your determinations. There are a number of points I wish the members of the committee to consider, ask questions of our very knowledgeable planning officers, and to debate to help you consider your vote. First, I would like to bring to the committee members' attention to the Bucklebury design statement and vision. I'll just read out sections, page 12. I'm quite happy to pass this round. So it says guidelines. So new buildings and extensions should respect the scale, density, style and general line of existing buildings, features sought after in new replacement buildings or extensions, including hip dormers, low profile chalet style bungalow conversions. All materials should be of good quality, sympathetic and appropriate in colour and form of harmonising the surroundings. Recommended materials, handmade or similar bricks, clay tiles for roofing, wooden door and window frames. There is some more information there, which, with the chair's permission, I'll give after this, because you may not be aware of the design statement for Bucklebury. I would ask committee members to give the Bucklebury vision some weight with your considerations as well. I would like the committee members to ask and to debate if the planned residence fits within that vision. Next, I would like to highlight the setting as recorded on the West Berkshire Council online map. And as an ex-geologist and geographer, there's nothing better than a map. It sits in countryside, which has its own planning policy, C1, I believe. It's an area of outstanding natural beauty, which comes under planning policy C4, I believe. It's a local wildlife site, it's a biodiversity opportunity site, landscape character assessment of woodland and open heathland mosaic, and also has a historic environment record of replanted ancient woodland, as described previously. Also, I would like to raise access to the site and entering the site, going down the track to the proposed location, which is currently has the temporary accommodation that James's family are in. You will have passed two original woodsman's cottages on the right-hand side going in, right by Hatch Lane itself. The opposite side of the lane as you go in, actually there is the settlement of Paradise Way, and that was built after the Second World War to house the homeless from the East End of London who were living in the abandoned military buildings on Bucklebury Common. There was, I believe, over 100,000 vehicles were used in D-Day from Bucklebury Common, and so there was a substantial amount of accommodation that was then used. In general, for Hatch Lane area of Chapel Row, housing is to the east of Hatch Lane and not to the west, where Middlewood is. So, for example, there's currently a new building occurring in Paradise Way at the moment, which I believe is about 10 residents, as well as 2 additional houses for sale in Paradise Way. Finally, the last thing for consideration and debate, I think, is the fire risk of the house in the woodland. Please remember Bucklebury Common and surrounding areas suffered extensive heathland and woodland fires in the mid-1970s. Thank you, Chair.
I was just about to tell you had 1 minute left. Thank you. Any members have any questions, please, for Councillor? No?
Is it possible just to give a copy of the vision to the committee, just so they can see page 12?
So I didn't quite catch that.
Is it possible to give a copy of the Bucklebury vision to, is it allowable?
I assume though it is a document that's being considered and is on the file. I mean, I think if members want to look at it, they could obviously look it up
online. Yes, absolutely.
Online.
Yeah.
But if they want to look at it, I don't have a problem because I think it would be on
Please
the.
pass around. Thank you. Thank you. Can we move on, please, then to questions for officers? Do any members have any questions for officers, please? Councillor Pool.
Excuse me, Chair, I was busy finishing a square of chocolate. I'm not entirely sure which officer this would go to. I think it might be Mr. Till. What would normally happen at the end of a temporary planning permission?
Thank you, Chairman. At the conclusion of a temporary planning permission, which is granted on the grounds of allowing a necessary rural workers dwelling for the purpose of establishment of a business on site, it would be normal for the applicant to apply for a permanent replacement if that business is going successfully and the business's accounts justify the sustaining of a permanent replacement under that business plan. The conditions or section 106 attached to a rural workers dwelling would ordinarily require its removal. To anticipate further questions on this, you'll note from the officer's report that in the planning permission concerned expired for the temporary dwelling in 2022. However, officers were aware at the time that there was a forthcoming application for the erection of a permanent replacement dwelling on the site. Therefore, officers used discretion to determine that it wasn't expedient at that stage to take any enforcement action to have the temporary dwelling removed from the site, and acting in the assumption that that dwelling continued to fulfill a useful purpose for the site.
So you have a supplementary?
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I always do. I'm a bit like Columbo, always have one more. And thank you, Mr. Till, for your explanation there. Just for clarity, you mentioned that it's a commercial building that's used for the business, whereas I think this application is for a residence, it's a private dwelling. Would that bear any impact for this application?
No, in planning terms, because the original building is associated with and justified by the authorised use of the surrounding site as a forestry business, and the new building would be justified by and conditioned to relate to the authorised use of the surrounding land, the tie is exactly the same. So there's no materiality to whether the applicant considers it to be tied to the commercial business or a private dwelling in planning terms.
Any other questions for Councillor Cotton?
Thank you, Chair. So to Mr. Till again, has not a precedent been set by the fact that there is already a residence there, which would set the precedent for a remaining building to be renewed?
Thank you, Chairman. To a certain extent, Councillor Cotton, I think that's a point to be raised in debate. But from your officer's point of view and from the inspector's point of view, indeed, it's a material planning consideration that the business is on site, that the existing dwelling is on site, and that under policy C5, as set out in the officer's report, one of the exceptions to the development outside of settlement boundary policy is for a permanent replacement dwelling in the case where a rural workers dwelling is concerned. So in that respect, the inspector considered that the permanent replacement dwelling was acceptable. Officers in the case of the previous refused application also considered that the principle of a replacement dwelling was acceptable. And officers consider in the case of this proposal that a replacement dwelling is acceptable. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you for the clarity.
Any other questions? Councillor Pool.
Thank you, Chair. Sorry, Mr. Till, I think I'm coming back to you again. It's a different question though this time. When you're looking at the plot that is associated to the dwelling, this site is on is part of, it's in the middle of ancient woodland, that there's a road that leads up to it, or there's a track that leads up to it. Where will be the boundary lines for the dwelling, or is it considered to be part of a yard? And therefore, what I'm trying to really understand and assess the risk of is creepage from further developments and expanding of the site for more houses. Is there a boundary where the development could take place, or is this going to be opening up for removal of that forest as an example?
Thank you, Chairman. Well, I think you've got a clear set of plans in front of you members that set out the amenity space associated with the new dwelling. And in actual fact, it's fenced off. And if I just share my screen of the location plan first of all, then members, you can see, looking at the land surrounding the dwelling, then what is taken in is the immediate space around the dwelling, which incorporates the access and the amenity space. And that corresponds to the amenity space as it's been fenced off on site. So there's no change proposed to the amenity space. The dwelling itself is to be sited partially over the existing access track, but not in such a matter as would significantly inhibit vehicles coming and going from the site. If I move to a block plan slide, so you can see that the dwelling projects somewhat further towards the track, which is the existing ancillary space essentially, but there's no suggestion within any of the plans, nor is there any deviation in the red line that would suggest a change to the residential boundary, and planning permission would need to be sought for any incorporation of further land into residential.
Thank you, Mr. Till. And that was a really lovely explanation. If I may, Chair, through you, just to double check my understanding of on page 43 of our pack this evening, there is a, it shows the, excuse me, the planning application in red, which is the track, and then the dwelling that's to be made, and then also the boundary line for the site in blue. What's the classification for that site? Is that the ancient woodland?
A point of clarity here is that the land shown in blue is any land that forms part of the applicant's ownership and control. So it doesn't relate directly necessarily to the application site itself. The land designation on all of the land forming the application site, and as I understand it, all the land within that blue line is ancient woodland, yes.
Any other questions? Councillor Pemberton.
Yes, thank you, Chair. When the ward member, Councillor Reid, spoke, he made a number of points relating to the Bucklebury design statement and why, in his opinion, he felt this application contravened some of those. Looking at the report that we've been given, there's one reference to that design statement at paragraph 26. That's the only reference that I can see, and no explanation as to why officers think that this application is in accordance with that. So I wonder if somebody could sort of flesh out for me a bit more detail as to why they're satisfied.
Thank you, Chairman. Members, it's important to understand the background to this application, which was that originally there was a refusal in terms of the design and scale of the dwelling. So officers felt at that stage that the dwelling did not meet with the requirements of policy, and included within that the Bucklebury Village Design Statement. So I'll quote from paragraph 26 of the inspector's decision, which members should bear in mind is for an identical dwelling. It would also reflect the aims of the Quality Design West Berkshire Supplementary Planning Document Series Part A, achieving design quality, adopted June 2006, and the Bucklebury Vision Parish Design Statement 2019, which sets out that new buildings should respect, amongst other things, the scale, density, and style of existing buildings and aims and objectives of the North Wessex Downs area of Outstanding Natural Beauty Management Plan 2019 to 2024 with regards to the vision for the AONB. So, members, in this case, your officers were not satisfied with the design of the dwelling, but we have taken our lead from the inspector, who was satisfied that it met with the requirements of the Bucklebury Village Design Statement. In respect of that, unless members are, well, my advice is that unless members are satisfied that the inspector hasn't in their decision taken sufficient account of that document, I would advise members to consider the requirements of it satisfied.
Any other questions? Okay, then, somebody would like to start the debate? Councillor Cottam.
Yes, I think this is another case of an outside inspector comes along and has a different opinion on certain subjects than we do, our officers and the local council, local parish councils and their plans. It's very sad. I've looked at the design and I can sympathise with the viewpoint, but if inspectors come back and said they're satisfied, leaves us in a very difficult situation. I'm happy to listen to other comments as to the suitability or otherwise, but I think we're on maybe weak ground on this one.
Thank you. Councillor Somner.
Thank you, Chair. I think viewpoint's an interesting word, Councillor Cotton, because I don't think there will be a viewpoint unless you're on site, from what I can see, and I think that needs to be borne in mind. I think as far as the inspectors' outcomes from the previous application, we do have to be mindful of that, and I'm sure that even if it was a different inspector that might pick up an appeal, let's play that line out, that inspector would take into account anything that had come previously and therefore would look at the previous inspector's report. And I think it's a logical and a sensible approach from officers to do exactly the same whilst they're working through the application with the applicant. I do understand the concerns that have been raised. I would say that it's not our place to identify solutions to an applicant's or family's desire to live in a certain location. It's not our place to identify alternative properties that may or may not be suitable. But actually, when we go back to the map that Councillor Pool highlighted to us, the properties appear to be outside the blue line anyway. So they're not part of the applicant owner's land as far as we can tell. I have to say, I am not identifying anything which would go against officer's recommendation at this stage, and I'd be happy to make a proposal when the time comes, Chair.
Thank you. Anybody else wish to speak? Councillor Pool.
I was actually really sad that I couldn't attend the site visit. As someone who comes from the north, probably guessed from my accent, Sharkora, we get quite a lot of woodland dwellings, and it's something that I would have loved to have seen so I could really contextualise the planning application. Very similar to Councillor Somner, after reading through the documentation, that it seems to be there or thereabouts. And I also hear the residents in the community, when you're looking to build a new dwelling, you look to build it to modern standards, which might not necessarily be the same as what the building is there. So you can't necessarily build a permanent structure that has been built on a temporary structure design. You make it afresh, you make it anew. And I'm actually relatively pleased with the conditions that the officers have proposed, starting on page 14. They seem to be very expansive, but I am open to any discussions that we may have to try and adapt those if appropriate, or if the rest of the committee feel necessary to minimise exposure or impact to the area. Councillor Sumner, I know that you're very good at this on other applications. I wonder if there's anything that you may wish to contribute at this time.
Councillor Sumner.
Happy to come back in. Thank you for that glowing endorsement, Councillor Pool. No, I think the only thing that I would pick up, and it comes actually from the statement from the parish council, is that lighting is a particular concern, and I can see that we've got a condition. Condition 11 is with regards to lighting. Anyway, so I'm not sure at this stage that there is anything that needs to be added that hasn't already been raised. I think we've got ecology covered. Lighting is always a concern in areas such as this, because of course anything that's lit up in a naturally dark area becomes obvious, and we've had many applications come through us before where we've had to consider that. But I can see nothing at this stage that needs to be added.
Councillor Pemberton.
Yeah, I've got very little to add. In all fairness, I agree with, I would say pretty much every word that Councillor Sommer said a few moments ago. My only concern as we were going through were the points made around future occupancy, but again, that's also been covered by condition to make sure that any dwelling or any habitation of the property is linked to the existing forestry business. From what the applicant has said, that forestry business has been operating for a number of years. Financial information relating to that has been given to the council. The limited company, whilst it's newer in terms of its incorporation, has been in place for just under a year. I literally have nothing else to add. At the moment, I'm content with officers' recommendations. I don't want to necessarily get into a conversation about amending conditions, but if other members want to do that, I'm open to it. But I've got nothing to add. Thanks.
Thank you. Councillor Pool.
Thank you, Chair. If I was to put my pedantic hat on, on condition 4, it says within 3 months of the first occupation of the new dwelling, the existing temporary development dwelling, will be demolished, but doesn't specify a time frame for it to be removed. That's the only thing that I would pick up. So, for example, within 3 months of the first occupation of the new dwelling, the existing temporary dwelling to the south of the application shall be demolished in its entirety and spoil removed from the site over a duration of, say, 1 year. If that would be amenable, Councillor Sumner, I know that you're very good at this.
I think it's covered within the opening gambit, and it's within 3 months.
Lovely, thank you. It might be my dyslexia kicking in. Thank you.
Would you like to comment on that, Mr. Till?
Thank you, Chairman. Pandering a little to Councillor Pool's pedantic tendencies, I think you're right, Councillor Pool, that there is no specific requirement within there for a time frame for the spoil from the dwelling to be removed. So if I was to suggest an amendment to that condition to address that potential for long-term retention of spoil, then I might say within a time scale to be agreed in writing with the local planning authority would be my suggestion.
Thank you. Does that satisfy?
Thank you, Chair. Yes, that would be most amenable to that. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any other debating points, please? Councillor Somner.
Councillor Somner is prepared to propose the recommendation of officers with the additional clarity on condition 4 demolition timeframes as noted by Councillor Pool, Chair.
Does that find a seconder? Councillor Pool, thank you. Okay, thank you. So we've had a proposal for officers' recommendation of that change to condition 4. Could all those in favour please show? Okay, thank you. Anybody against? Any abstentions? Thank you. So, that application has been approved with that one change to that condition. So, thank you very much. And move on then to the next item, which is application 24/01212/FUL, land to the rear, 3739 King Street, Mortimer Common. Could I ask Mr. Till to introduce the item, please?
Thank you, Chairman. I shall just attempt to share my screen. Just bear with me again. There we are. Right. Thank you, Chairman. This application proposes the demolition of the existing workshop on the application site and ancillary buildings and other bric-a-brac, and erection of 4 new dwellings 4 existing flats, numbers 37, 37A, 39 and 39A, are proposed to be retained alongside King Street. The application has a recommendation of approval subject to completion of a Section 106 legal agreement to secure biodiversity net gain. The application was subject to a ward member's call-in due to concerns with overdevelopment of the site. The proposals have since been reduced by one dwelling from 5 to 4, but members may be aware that there is no provision in the Constitution to withdraw a call-in once made. Nevertheless, 10 letters of objection have been received on the application. These raise concerns with lack of sufficient car parking, poor access to the site, and traffic generation in King Street. I shall just go through the plans and photography. So there you have the location plan, and the dwellings that are proposed are, hang on. So actually, this is the existing block plan, and you can see that there are a number of buildings, including the existing automobile workshop that would be proposed for removal. And on the left-hand side to the west of the site, you're looking at the existing flats which are proposed to be retained. Members, this is the block plan as proposed. You can see the parking layout here with, I believe, 18 parking spaces. The dwellings that are proposed are 2 terrace dwellings sort of located in the centre of the site, and then 2 detached dwellings located to the south-east of the site. This is the existing dwellings on the site. Those are the flats. These are plots 1 and 2, which are the terrace dwellings to the centre of the site. This is plot 3, one of the 2 detached dwellings to the southeast, and plot 4, the other detached dwelling to the southeast. These are the carports that are proposed. And there are some street scene elevations, some more street scene elevations. This is looking north at the rear of the site. This is a view taken looking south from the access. This is looking into the site from the east. This is the existing automobile workshop on the site. This is a shed, which is, as you can see, in somewhat dilapidated condition. Looking north to the neighbouring properties, looking south, another dilapidated building on the site. That's a closer view of that building. This is to the west, and this is looking north to the adjacent bungalow. Members, the proposed works are for development of 4 new dwellings on a brownfield site within the existing settlement boundary of Mortimer. Therefore, in your officer's view, the principle of development is acceptable. Your officer's report sets out the considerations in terms of design and amenity, but in short, the proposed works are not considered to result in harmful impacts or an unduly poor standard of amenity for existing and future occupants, and would in actual fact have a considerable benefit in terms of tidying up the existing site, as well as provision of housing, which obviously should be given some emphasis and considerable weight. Turning to the objections, which primarily relate to highways impacts, officers note that the access to the site is the same as was historically used by the workshop that's now proposed for demolition. and was considered acceptable by a planning inspector in 2015 in an appeal against refusal of planning permission for that workshop, which was upheld by the inspector. Highways have raised no objections to either access or parking, and as you'll see from your officer's report, are satisfied that a level of acceptable parking has been provided on the site. Members, you'll note from your update sheet that there are now comments reported from the ecologist regarding biodiversity net gain, and that consequently an updated recommendation the applicant be invited to enter into Section 106 agreement to secure biodiversity net gain has been made. Members, in short, the proposals need to secure off-site mitigation in terms of biodiversity net gain for reasons of that the amount of housing would need to be reduced by at least one dwelling in order to provide it on site, and the applicant is concerned that that simply wouldn't deliver a viable level of housing to carry out the development. So a Section 106 is required in order to secure that contribution. Subject to the agreement of the conditions set out in your report and the Section 106, your officer's recommendation is for approval. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Till. Mr. Dowding, are there any highways comments, please?
Not at the moment, Mr. Chairman. Thank you.
Thank you. Move on then to public speaking. I understand that Councillor Bridgman and Councillor Richardson from Parish Council wish to speak via Zoom.
We have Councillor Bridgman. I don't have Councillor Richardson online.
Thank you. Councillor Bridgman, I think you know the rules, but you have 5 minutes, please. Would you like a warning when you get towards the end?
30 seconds should be enough, Chairman, but just to explain that Councillor Richardson is the new chairman of our planning committee, so that's why he's on the list. He may be appearing before you in the future.
Thank you.
Chairman, members, thank you. And Chairman, thanks to you personally for attending the site visit as the sole representative of the committee. Members, the report records our councillors objecting, but the response reported in the agenda pack appears to be our response to the original application for 5 houses, not the response to this amended application. That second response is included on the planning portal, and one of the 4 questions we raised relating to bins is now dealt with at 6.17 of the report. However, we can't see that the other 3 are responded to in the report. These are, firstly, a parking space for plot 3 appears to be allocated within a turning area, and the turning area should be kept free for turning. Second, given that there isn't enough turning area for bin lorries, is there enough for emergency vehicles in the event that they need to attend a property on the site? And finally, are highways satisfied that the parking spaces are large enough? Now, we haven't received response to those, and those are our specific questions. Whether the answers affect your decision, I leave to you. Now I would like to turn to compliance with planning policy. And in doing so, I note that in the last application, Councillor Reid asked you to consider the Bucklebury Village Design Statement. I would remind this committee that Stratfield Mortimer has a neighbourhood development plan, which includes adopted planning policies. Paragraph 5.1 of the report rightly says, the following policies of the statutory development plan are relevant to the consideration of this application, and it then goes on to include RS3 and GD1 of the NDP. Paragraph 6.8 says, policy RS3 in the SNDP states that any new residential developments within the Mortimer settlement boundary must comply with the policies of this plan. Now, what is disappointing is that 5.1 is the only mention of planning policy GD1 in the report. GD1 reads, in order to provide high quality developments in the parish, all developments of any sort shall comply with the following parameters. First, new developments on allocated and windfall sites will be designed to deliver the Building for Life 12 principles. Second, new development will consider the amenity of existing residents adjacent to the new development. And third, any new development within the settlement boundary will be encouraged to prepare a site design brief, including community involvement, which reflects the policies set out in this plan. This brief would then be included in any planning submission after consultation via the parish council. So, has this applicant complied with planning policy? Like the report, the design and access statement mentions GD1. But then again, like the report, that is once, in passing, and the statement then doesn't deal with the question of compliance. So first, we accept that a site design brief is encouraged and not mandatory. However, the question of neighbouring amenity and compliance with Building for Life are mandatory. So first, the design and access statement at 515 says, there will be no unacceptable impact on surrounding residential properties as a result of this development. We leave the committee to decide if that is correct and whether, in the words of GD1, this development considers the amenity of existing adjacent residents, and you'll note the objections on that. Second, having looked at the Building for Life principles, we suspect that this application complies, although there must be a question about Principle 4 as to housing mix. But like the report, the statement fails to address compliance. So, we submit that GD1 has not been complied with. But again, whether that should affect your decision, we leave to you. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you.
Chairman, just a point of information. I actually did attend my own site visit. I got the times mixed up.
I was tempted to mention that, Councillor Gossip. Yes, there was a slight mix-up over timings. Could you just remain for any questions from members, please? Are there any questions, please? Councillor Pool.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Councillor Bridgman, for your presentation this evening. I'm aware within the neighbourhood development plan within Mortimer, there is a structure where developments should come before the parish committee. I wonder if you can confirm if this particular application has come before the parish, please.
Well, clearly we've considered it in planning, certainly in first respect of both applications, or the main application and then this amendment to the application. So we've considered that and given our comments, but it hasn't come before the council as part of the initial design process prior to the application being put in, which is what GD1 is all about.
Lovely. Thank you, Councillor Bridgman.
Thank you. Any other questions from members, please? Thank you. Thank you, Councillor Bridgman.
Thank you.
Perhaps we can move on to questions of officers, and perhaps first of all, sorry, I beg your pardon. I beg your pardon. Councillor Carter, ward member, would you like to come to the podium, please? And
thank you very much.
And you also have 5 minutes. Would you like a warning?
No, I'll go without the warning because it's a bit intrusive. So okay. I'll chance it. Does the clock start now?
And if you could remain when you finished for any questions from members, please.
Will do, yeah. You might want to just have in mind page 33 of the report pack, which is section 6.10. I'll just give you a couple of seconds to find that. Just while you do that, Councillor Mays looked surprised I was here. The reason I get involved with planning applications, perhaps he didn't, is when residents come to me specifically, which is what's happened here, or they're of a strategic nature. I do actually fully endorse what Parish Council said, some of which actually mirrors my comments already, specifically on the parking space on some of the properties, the size and the turning area, which I'll come to in a minute, but also the GD1 point I completely endorse as well. Whilst I agree with, can you hear, have I gone off? No. I agree with the officer's observation on amenity in the sense that in the report it says Mortimer has no, as the neighbourhood plan refers to, vernacular style, because actually in reality there is a mix of housing types throughout, including in King Street and including in the vicinity of the proposed site. But what I don't agree with is the clear assertion in the report, which does seem to have quite a strong basis for the recommendation that this is an urban setting. No offence to anybody in Thatcham, this is not an urban setting. And I'm confident that the rural urban classification states that a place like Mortimer with a population of under 10,000 can only be rural. So I'd be interested in officers' comment on that. And I didn't spot that till recently, otherwise I'd have raised it with a case officer who I have discussed this case with, by the way. I meant to say that. I'm just called it in as on a whim. But the relevance is that I think it affects the housing density consideration and the garden size and the parking, for example. So specifically on the drawing, the block plan as proposed, which is on page 51 that Mr. Till put up earlier. Plot 2, it states in the report, will cause a degree of oblique overlook across the rear garden of 35. But then it says this is the type of this type of situation is one you would normally expect in an urban situation. It's not an urban situation. As I stated, I don't accept Mortimer as urban. So I think the committee does need to take account of that overlook of 35, which is a bungalow in its determination of this case. Secondly, again on the block diagram, I'm concerned at the apparent impact of the first floor front elevations of plots 3 and 4 onto the number 35, which is a bungalow. I'm also concerned about the apparent oblique impact of plot 1's second floor front elevation on the Windmill Road properties to the northeast. For example, the one between Holly Cottages and 78A Windmill Road. And maybe there could even be a potential impact at the first floor rear elevation of number 1 of this proposal on number 82 Windmill Road. One of the urban design features I've noticed is that the occupants of plot 3 cannot practically turn a car round on their drive because the parking spaces for plot 4 are in the way. And despite the fact there's a label on the drawing saying turning area, I don't see how you can turn, because you'd either have to do a multi-point turn where multi is probably about 20, or you have to do a really weird reversing maneuver, which, again, not in keeping with the rural developments. It does seem to be, we are still overdeveloped, I think. And as I stated in my submission, and the parish council has also said, one parking space for plot 3 has been put in a turning area, and although it probably won't be marked as a parking space, it's going to be in the way, and it's also going to encourage somebody to park next to it, making it probably not a turning area. And then there's just finally the point about the width of one parking space for each of 3 and 4 seems narrower. That may be an anomaly of the drawing. So in summary, I remain concerned that this proposal is not in keeping with a village setting. It is still relatively cramped, overdeveloped, particularly the plots 3 and 4 and their associated parking, and the amenity impact, particularly on number 35 King Street, but not just number 35. So I actually think the application probably should be revised further to reduce the housing density, and actually that would appear to tick the box of the biodiversity net gain, which I know the comment was made that then it's maybe not affordable, but that's my thoughts. And the parking space width probably should be noted in any condition if you do pass it. Done. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any questions for Councillor Carter, please? You seem to have got off slightly.
No problem.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
So we move on then to questions for officers. Perhaps we should start, and if Mr. Till could answer the questions regarding the village design statement.
Thank you, Chairman. The neighbourhood plan, in fact. Members, I can't comment because I was not the case officer on this application as to whether the proposals meet with the Building for Life standards. I can comment that the case officer has provided a very comprehensive assessment on neighbouring amenity. And in regard to the public engagement aspect of the policy, that's a pre-planning requirement, which it's up to the applicant to comply with. It is a recommendation rather than being a requirement of the policy. I should also note, having looked briefly at the planning history, it doesn't appear that pre-application advice was sought for this application, at which that recommendation could have been highlighted. But similarly, members, I wouldn't consider it a strong potential reason for refusal. In terms of building for life, you've heard from Councillor Bridgman that he considers it likely that the building does comply. Now, the policy should be given due and significant weight, and compliance with it should be given due and significant weight. But my view is that if the application is not far off complying with Building for Life, or does comply with Building for Life, then it effectively sufficiently meets the requirements of that policy for us to maintain a recommendation of approval on it. And it is unfortunate that the officer did not go into a more detailed assessment on that, those particular requirements of the policy. Hopefully that helps, Chairman.
Thank you. Could I ask Mr. Dowding if he could comment on the issues regarding parking and turning that have been raised?
Certainly, Mr. Chairman. I had been expecting some comments about that, hence why I have a plan in front of me showing the turning movements of a large fire engine in and out of the estate. So to answer that question, could a fire appliance actually get in and out? Yes, a fire appliance can. And in fact, the turning movement shows very clearly that even with a car parked in the space for property number 3, the turning head is still a viable turning head for a fire appliance. So I think that sort of answers a couple of the questions in one go. That yes, it's not the turning head has a parking space adjacent to it. So it's not a space actually in the turning head, it's a space adjacent to the turning head. It's just the way it's been drawn, it looks a bit odd. Question about the spaces not necessarily being as even as they all look. It's probably just the way it's been drafted. All the spaces do comply with the minimum standards of 2.4 by 4.8. Obviously, spaces in front of the carports may be slightly wider to allow movement between the spaces a little bit more easier. But there's certainly no doubt over the fact that the spaces are to standard. Other than that, I don't think there was anything else that you were after clarification of. But if I have missed something, please do shout.
Thank you. Are there any other questions? Councillor Mays.
Yes, thank you, Chairman. First of all, Mr. Dowding, if you could tell me whether the road access from King Street to the back of the site is going to be adopted. Therefore, will the refuse lorries be able to go down to the middle of the site?
Thank you for that. No, the simple answer is no, the site is not going to be adopted. It is less than the adoptable number of properties, as being 4, 5, it would have to be adopted, 4 it doesn't. We understand that our waste service are happy with the requirement to service the site. I have seen confirmation of that, but no, it will not be adopted.
So can you confirm that the waste bins from the site, from the 4 new houses, will be taken to the King Street area for collection?
The bin collection point right at the beginning of King.
Yeah, I would say, as being mentioned in the chamber, Mr. Chairman, there is a bin collection area identified, which has been agreed with our waste service.
Okay, it's a long way. Thank you.
I think the distance is actually mentioned in the report. Councillor Sommer.
Thank you, Chair. Mr. Till, I don't know whether you're able to display what I've just mentioned to you. Have you got it there, or do you want me to send it over to you?
Councillor Somner, apologies, no, I haven't managed to find it on the file in the short amount of time.
See if that email comes through then. One of the documents in the application has, there we go, should be able to see it now very soon, has additional information for the turning circles, which I think might be helpful for members to see. Yeah. So if scroll down a bit and then probably have to blow it up quite a bit, I suppose. So you can actually see there what the proposal is for larger vehicles coming in and turning. And I think, I mean, it's unusual to see that level of detail, but this one isn't included in our printed pack. However, it is part of the application. So I am working on the basis and looking for confirmation, as it's questions to officers, that this is exactly that. And this is because it's got measurements on it and everything as well, this is what is being taken into account to resolve the issues that are currently being raised.
I think it's a question for Mr. Dowding.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yes, that is the plan that I was referring to when I said that the fire engine had been tracked in and out of the site, and it showed the relationship between the turning head and the space for property number 3. So yes, this is confirmation.
Perfect. Thank you, Mr. Downing.
Thank you. Are there any other questions for officers? Councillor Pool.
Thank you, Chair. Councillor Carter mentioned the difference between urban and rural. Now, Mortimer is a relatively large village, but when does it start being a rural village and start being an urban district? And what are the considerations that we need to consider for planning?
Thank you, Chairman. Thank you, Councillor Pool. I get to use one of my favourite terms, which is red herring. I am forever correcting officer reports in respect of statements made about urban versus suburban versus rural. And unfortunately, this one appears to have slipped through my net because I would certainly have corrected to suburban. The relevant consideration in planning terms is not whether Mortimer is any of those things, because Mortimer is a village with a settlement boundary, and therefore the principle of further residential development is considered acceptable within Mortimer. The important thing in planning terms is to look at the relative grain in terms of the street scene and surrounding development. Now, this plan, the block plan, is actually unusually useful because they're quite often zoomed a little bit too much to gauge the grain properly of surrounding development. But here you can see development along King Street and you can see development along Windmill Street. You can see along King Street you've got a mixture of semi-detached properties, detached properties, and along Windmill Street, you've got a similar, slightly finer grain, in fact, of detached and semi-detached properties. Now, by comparing the proposed dwellings, you can see that actually the grain proposed in terms of development, and I apologise using the term grain, I realise I'm using a bit of a technical planning term, but we're talking about the relative amount of development within a certain space there. And actually the density of development and the grain of development is reasonably in keeping with its surroundings in your officer's view, and in fact slightly more generous than some of the surrounding properties, although I think I echo the planning officer's thoughts in seeking amendments to this scheme that for the size of site, it's probably about the right amount of housing. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. Any other questions? Councillor Kanda.
Just on the points raised on overlooking, I'm assuming that it's a level site and that overlooking is a given anyway, and therefore there's no special dispensation given.
Thank you, Chairman. The site is within settlement. There are specific guidelines within our West Berkshire quality design supplementary planning document. The planning officer in writing the report has made specific mention of what those guidelines are and how they're reflected on this site, and those include things like separation distances from the rear of neighbouring properties. And in terms of the oblique view that was mentioned in Councillor Carter's speech, that could equally be applied to suburban relationships as much as urban relationships. We're not talking a high density urban development that's proposed on this site, and it's not, in terms of the relationships between buildings, there aren't overlooking relationships that would be unusual for a medium density suburban development within this site.
Are there any other questions? Councillor Pemberton.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. Mr. Till, you mentioned that it's not possible to achieve the new biodiversity net gains on site, and that will be secured by way of Section 106. I can't see any mention of that in the proposed planning conditions, and I just wonder if I'm missing it. If I'm not missing it, could we obviously have a conversation at some point about adding it? And can you explain to me what that Section 106 condition, what it might look like?
Thank you, Chairman. The Section 106 is referred to in the update sheet, not in the main agenda report. And I should have made that a little bit more clear in my presentation. My apologies, Councillor Pemberton. The report actually, the Section 106 actually is something that, because biodiversity net gain legislation is very new, is something that we're currently working into a series of templates for standardisation. And this would be a standard agreement seeking a requirement that financial contributions are made over a number of years to a designated biodiversity net gain site in order to offset the failure of this site to provide 10% biodiversity net gain. So it would be an equivalent amount of contribution to that 10% net gain over a number of years. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. Any other questions? Thank you. Would someone like to start the debate? Councillor.
On my solo site visit, I thought, this needs redeveloping in a big way. I mean, it's an absolute mess and could possibly be a health hazard with rats, etc. I look at the plans presented before us, and I think they are very, very good. I think the architect's done an excellent job, and I think it's it is within the settlements layout already. I think it's a very good plan.
Councillor Pemberton. Oh, Councillor Somner.
Thank you very much. Yes, I unfortunately wasn't able to make the site visit. I've done what they call a desktop. I'm doing it now, and I can see quite clearly on Google Maps that it's quite interesting about the diversity side of things, biodiversity side of things, because when you look at it, it's basically all concrete and tarmac. And it's only the bit where the two detached dwellings are that is actually green. This looks like a vast improvement. I can understand concerns of overlooking. I can appreciate that, there's a sizable hedge, and overlooking that to look over the bungalow would be. We can't guarantee the hedge is going to stay the height it is, obviously, but it would need to be quite some height to be able to encroach onto the the bungalow side of things. I think this looks like a good design to me. It looks like it's been worked through, and it looks like the applicant has been working with officers successfully, and hopefully will continue to do so for the updated recommendations. For my mind at the moment, this is a vast improvement on what is effectively an industrial area that is a mess. I can only imagine that people living next door to it will probably be fed up with some of the activity that goes on where it is at the moment. On planning terms, it looks like an improvement, a vast improvement.
Thank you. Councillor Pemberton.
Yeah, and just to add to that, Chair, I think actually the current occupants of the flats at King Street will probably welcome the fact that their parking situation will be regularised. It just seems to be a free-for-all at the moment. Throw into the mix the fact that the site will be brought back into some kind of residential use. We desperately need houses. I've made that point elsewhere. It is unfortunate that perhaps the applicant hasn't complied with every single word, dot and comma of the local parish's neighbourhood development plan. I find neighbourhood development plans fascinating the more I hear about them, and Thatcham is just in the process of starting to draw up its own. Do I think that administrative oversight is enough for us to say no tonight and then to make the applicant start all over again to speak to the parish to come back here, or get to the point where we'll probably say yes to it anyway? I don't. So I think subject to perhaps inserting the condition around the BNG, the Biodiversity Net Gain Section 106 agreement, I would be content to propose. Obviously, other members may wish to speak, but I'd be content to propose officers' recommendations with that amendment. Thank you.
Do any other members wish to speak before? Councillor Mays.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. My only concern is the number of parking spaces and the number of bedrooms and in the various houses that are being proposed. I think that I heard that there's 18 parking spaces. And I would doubt that if you count the bedrooms up and the district's policy on housing and parking spaces, whether that will meet that number.
I believe it does meet the standard. Perhaps Mr. Dowding could confirm that, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. It doesn't quite, no. There are half a space missing on plots 1 and 2. They should have 2.5 spaces because they are 3-bedroom properties within that area. They've got 2. However, we have taken the view that considering its location, considering that there are other visitor spaces nearby, also considering that there are areas where residents may form their own informal parking spaces, a half a space missing per those 2 dwellings really isn't a showstopper, and we were quite happy to support this based upon that.
Have you allowed parking spaces for the flats in the King Street?
Yes, they are allowed, formalised, and are probably a considerably better place than they are.
How many have you allowed for that?
They have 2 spaces each.
So there's 4 for the 2 flats?
There are 6 for the 3 flats.
Thank you.
Sorry, which 3 flats you've taken then? Does that include the businesses?
It's for flats 39A, 37 and 37A.
Sorry, I can't read the numbers on this one.
Yeah. Just, yeah.
6 spaces then.
Oh, well, Councillor Mays is looking at the plans. Does anybody else?
That includes the shop, does it? The shops are this bit, the flats are there. Yes, I know that. I realise that. That's where the workshop was.
That's the answer to your question.
Okay.
Sorry, does it include the actual shop?
No, it includes the flats.
And the flats above it?
It includes the flats above the shop. Yes, it includes the flats.
And the one on the ground floor on the, what is the southern side of that block?
There's flat 39 has 2 spaces down the side of it off King Street itself. So that must be the one on the ground floor.
Yeah, I'm not sure that's correct, but still, okay.
Does any other member wish to speak? Councillor Kanda.
Just like to make a comment that actually there's a couple of visitor spaces which actually I find quite unusual. In a lot of developments, they seem to forget the visitor spaces, so I'm quite encouraged by the fact there's at least 2 there. I was just making a comment in support.
We've had a proposal. Anybody wish to second that proposal? Councillor Kanda, thank you. Sorry.
Sorry, I just wanted to clarify, we don't need a planning condition if we've got a section 106 agreement. So I don't know if that's, yeah, I didn't know what you wanted in terms of planning condition.
Well, if it's not needed, it's not needed. I'm not going to die in a ditch about it.
I thought you were referring to the updated recommendation on the update sheet.
That's right.
It says the development manager be authorised to invite the applicant to enter into section 106 agreement to ensure a minimum of 10%.
Sorry, apologies. I thought you also said you wanted a planning condition.
I did, you're right. But if I understand you correctly, you're saying we don't need that because that's covered by the section 106. If that's the case, I'd be content with that. I'm just raising it.
So a legal agreement will have to be entered into before they issue planning permission, which will set out the parameters of the biodiversity net gain. That's.
You second that, thank you. Those in favour of officer's recommendation with that updated condition, thank you. Sorry, 1, 2, 3, 4. Those against, please. 1. And abstentions? Thank you. So that is passed. So the applicant, the application has been given conditional permission. Thank you. So I think that concludes our business. I'd like to close the meeting. Thank you.